Hi everyone, this is Shibani. You get a lot of emails from me from time to time. So I work for the marketing team at Lead Squared, and you are very welcome to another Lead Squared webinar. So this is exclusively for those in the lending sector, but we are very happy to have those who are also not from the lending sector. I think I did see a couple of sign-ups from people from other industries. So very warm welcome to you as well. We are discussing how lending institutions can become agile through digital to offset business challenges. I have a very special guest with me and a very special host with me also for this session. So Nilesh, who is our co-founder and CEO, will be hosting this session. And our key speaker is Mr. KV Srinivasan, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Profectus Capital. Just a little bit about him before I ask him to actually share a few lines about himself. So he is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. He has worked for over 3 decades of experience with ICICI, Prudential Life Insurance, ITC, Classic Finance, Real Estate Life Insurance. So a lot of companies there. So Mr. KV sir, if you could please share a few lines about yourself, and of course, please tell us a little bit more about Profectus Capital.
Sure. Thanks, Shivani, for the brief introduction. Hi, everyone. It's obviously a pleasure to be here on the webinar. Just to sort of add to what Shivani said, Profectus is a relatively newer NBFC. It's now about 3 years into operation, and our focus is primarily on funding the MSME sector, and that too specifically in manufacturing and certain key services sectors which are critical to the Indian economy. Over the past 3 odd years that we have been in operation, the world has changed significantly. You had a fairly good boom time, which was running till about August 18. Then IL&FS happened, which was specifically a big problem for the NBFC sector. And after that, obviously, the current pandemic that we are still dealing with has come and hit us from nowhere. So obviously, life has been, a question of trying to find the solution to a problem which we never thought about earlier. So the very fact that we are talking about agility today has actually emerged from all these uncertainties, because if you're agile, will you be in a position to tackle all these uncertainties? So that's hopefully we'll get some thoughts on that today.
Beautifully put there. Thank you so much, KV sir. Hi Nilesh, good to have you back hosting another webinar. So what can we expect from the session today? What are the key questions that you will be putting across?
I think thank you, Shibani, and I want to just add one comment to you. Said that if people are not from lending, they're also welcome. I think if they're not from lending, they must be on the borrowing side. So everybody is in lending business and borrowing business. So everybody has interest in this session for sure. So yeah, I think today we just want to touch upon the whole the transformation which all businesses are going through right now, and each business obviously is in a different cycle of transformation, but everybody is doing some of the other thing. Lending happens to be at the center of the storm, right? I mean, because it's the it's core part of the economy. Like fundamentally, the more lending happens, the faster economy grows. And if if people don't pay up, then obviously it affects the entire entire ecosystem. And given the the changes which we are observing in the economy, and a lot of stress on the SME sector, I think it'll be good to know how technology is really helping in driving some of the transformation for the lending institutions and making it easy for the borrowers as well, right? As in, what is the impact of technology? Plus, love to touch upon the new age kind of companies which are coming in, like what is their impact to the whole ecosystem, and would love to hear KV sir's view on these things and what he observes, because he's seen the the most classic lending, 30 years back, right? I mean, from that time till today, the world has of course changed, substantially, and so really maybe some anecdotes, sir, you can share on funny anecdotes on what lending used to be and what it is today and where you see it's going. I think it'll be fun to see any live examples, if you remember. That'll be so we'll sort of talk all of these things today and really go back. Maybe if there are specific examples, not to be named but to be discussed only, would be fun to see, having today. So I think I'm really looking forward to an exciting session, and sort of discuss all of these things today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the audience, you know now what to expect from this session. So stay tuned. If you have questions, please keep them coming. We will take them up, I think, towards the end of the presentation. So now I'm just going to disappear and go backstage, but I'm around if you need my help with anything. Over to you, Gandhi.
Thank you, Shivani, for starting this up. So I'll just take the lead and maybe ask KV sir, if you can, in today's, since the whole concept of NPA is sort of bubbling up, right? It's coming in from all the sides, right? So how in this situation, you see businesses looking to identify the creditworthiness of the borrowers, and if there is any comparison you can draw from the past, like historical methods of doing it, and what are the new ones, and where you see it sort of going from here.
Yeah, I think in the past about a decade or so, the transformation that has happened to our entire digital ecosystem has been nothing short of miraculous. Okay, and now when I'm saying our ecosystem, I'm meaning the Indian ecosystem per se. Right from the time the UIDAI was set up, and in this whole transformation, I think the biggest change agent has been the government of India itself, because the government has actually pushed towards more digitalization, more formalization of the economy, and virtually, creating a sort of a network where everything that needs to be tracked, so it is desirable to be tracked, is being tracked. Right? Say today, for instance, sitting at my table, I can actually figure out what a customer is or a prospect is really doing in his organizational life, whether he's doing well or not, what sort of production, how much did he sell last month, is he defaulting anywhere in his loans, etc. All these things are today available to me at a touch of a button, right, virtually. So because the tracking of, or rather linking up between the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, that was the real starting point of this whole revolution. And post the implementation of GST, now today, a lot of the so-called non-formal or informal sectors have actually come into the formal sector, including some of the people who did not want to come in. But, it's only desirable that the entire economy becomes more formal and we don't have a cash economy really. So those kind of changes that have happened over the past 5, 6, 7 years, or maybe even 10 years, I would say, are hugely impacting the way in which lending itself is being done today. So, gone are the days when you really took a PAN card copy and a photograph and maybe a introduction from some friendly neighborhood guy, and you would open an account, right? Today, if you want to open a savings bank account, all you need is your Aadhaar card. And that effectively establishes your entire KYC. There is no need for a neighborhood panwala giving you an introduction and so on and so forth. So life has changed a lot in the banking and financial services side. So naturally, which obviously means that today, when you are trying to get to a customer who is being worthy of given money to, you have lots and lots of data which is available. Now, how you use that, what is the kind of conclusion that you want to draw, etc. It obviously depends upon the organization and what sort of risk appetite the lender has towards the market. But data is immensely available. Today you can actually get a full analysis of somebody's bank statement done in a matter of few seconds. Now, you might be aware that sometime back, about 2 years or so ago, the public sector banks actually launched a product called 59-minute loan, right? For the MSME sector specifically. from the time the documents get submitted electronically, the sanction would be available to the prospective borrower within 59 minutes, right? And that entirely rides on this digital background or backbone that the government has set into place. So therefore, lending today has become a lot more scientific, rather than being a pure art form where I would come and sit in front of you and talk to you and find out whether you are a good guy or a bad guy and then try to lend to you. So that art has been partly replaced by the science, which is obviously riding upon your bank statement, your understanding of how much your operations are really worth, etc., etc. So life has changed a lot, and in that whole thing, naturally the predictability of failure of a business or a borrower is become much better today. Yes, there is still a large element of this art piece which I'm talking about of lending, where you are still trying to find out through a touch and feel approach the intention to repay. Ability to repay today has been more or less made into a science, but intention to repay, I could have the money, but I still choose not to pay to you. So that sort of tendencies can only be determined through a personal interaction. Otherwise, rest of it has become a lot more formal. Even there is so much of work which is happening depending upon what sort of social media interactions do you have, etc., where I can try and find out a little bit about your intention to repay as well. What sort of cultural makeup do you have? What sort of value systems do you have? I try to understand all of that, but that's still evolving as a science. But I guess as we go for further and further into this whole data sciences part, the biggest beneficiary of that would be the banking and NBFC sector.
So, sir, you brought a very interesting point, and I just made some little notes here that so government played a huge role in knocking off the one big part of the whole digital journey was not being there, bringing it like using whatever all the elements they have put together. So you have the formalization of the economy coming into the pace, so the people can access more data, which is good. So now, if earlier in the days, if a lender had efficiency in doing that part of the house, like that part of the process, they would be a better lender. They can grow faster than the other if you can knock off those process efficiencies, right? Right. Now all of this is there, let's say, on fingertips. Now, how does a lender compete with another lender then? Like, how do you win more? Like, what's the secret sauce now? Like, where should people focus on now? Because if, let's say, this piece is getting knocked out of the way, then where do I? So there are two pieces, right? Of course, the borrower identification, risk, and other things. But I'd love to hear from you. What are the challenges ahead of the lender now? Like, given this is solved, then now what's next? Like, what is then the next item on the list?
Yeah, it's a very important question. Obviously, if this is whatever I said is known to me, it is also known to every other competitor of mine, right? So there's nothing unique about it. So if somebody can get a GST verification and income tax verification, all of that done in a matter of a few minutes, so can anyone else. So that has become more and more commoditized. The entire tech backbone is becoming, or definitely has become quite a bit, very commoditized. So for a price, you can ask for the same service that I'm availing of, or I can ask for the same price, same services that you are availing of.
But one second. Sir, 1 second. Sorry to interject. On the record, but if you ask our service, it will be expensive than what we have given to Profectus. So I just sorry, sir. I thought I'll just make a quick point.
Yeah. Coming back to the point, basically, so that is itself no longer a cutting edge, right? So that kind of only raises the platform from where you were to a slightly higher level, where a lot of the obvious risks are kind of getting taken care of. Now, where does the cutting edge therefore lie? Cutting edge lies in two parts. One is the art part of the lending, which I spoke about, where data is there, but how do you interpret data? What sort of call taking do you take, right? What is your risk appetite? What is your judgment on a particular segment or a particular customer, etc.? Those are things which obviously are very important. And I hope at least that there is no formula which kind of comes across tomorrow and then gets force fitted onto this to replace the art also. But the judgment part of it is something which is very important. The second factor is that today, since everybody can promise a similar kind of turnaround times, and so therefore there are only two areas where you can actually compete with the others, right? One is of course the price part. Now Mr. Nilesh is giving me a loan at 9%, so I'll go somewhere else where I can get 8.95, correct? So, and this price competition in any sector, and especially more so in the lending sector, is a no-win kind of a competition, right? Because there is no end to it, right? I've also, when in my youth, when I started working, HDFC Limited used to give home loans for 25 years at 18% fixed. Today, you are saying, 6% kind of rates for home loan, the same home loan, right? So therefore, life has changed a lot, and therefore pricing itself has come down significantly. Truck finance used to be done at 40% when I started working. Today it's down to 9.5%, 10%, etc. So huge changes have happened. So where has all the margin disappeared? Right? Obviously, margin has disappeared, and some part of that has been compensated because of the improved efficiencies that we spoke about, brought in primarily due to technology and better utilization of manpower and better heuristics and all of that. But at a point in time, this price competition has to stop, because there is a point of no return which you will reach sooner. Because if you don't have any net interest margin left, there is really no point in doing lending. So that is not a game which is worth fighting beyond a point. So therefore, the only way you can actually attract more customers and retain more customers is by improving your service level to a next standard, next higher level. So that is exactly where two things are important. One is, of course, that understanding the customer behavior and understanding his needs as far as possible. If you ahead of time, that is in anticipation, if you're able to clearly figure out what the hell is he having in his mind, you should be in a position to do it better. The second part is, of course, that it's a simple question of promising something and then delivering and sticking to your commitment there, right? So these are two things. So one is being better organized, which is what I mean by trying to the promises made by the sales team in the field. So that is one. The second one is that how do you get into the mind of the customer and try to see, what is he really intending, right? The sooner you make out, you are in a position to reach to him faster, and therefore you stand a better chance of having your foot into the door first, and therefore the possibility of getting a sale is better. If I take a very simple parallel, I'm sure you would have heard this from some of the very successful insurance agents. When we started working in the insurance sector, the one thing that everybody would tell is that if you want to make a sale, try to track a person's lifestyle or life cycle changes, right? Suppose stand in front of the CA Institute and you catch hold of a person who is coming out with a smile. Obviously the person has passed the exam, and you start tracking that person from them, right? Now, obviously she will get into a job, right? Obviously start to earn. Then maybe a few years down the line get married and have children and grow to the middle age, and towards the end do some kind of retirement planning. So if you're able to track the person from the stage that he or she comes into the job market until the time she's actually looking for a pension solution, you have several life cycle changes that happen in any person's life, right? So at each point in time, you have an opportunity to sell an insurance policy or a pension policy to the person. So this is one classical way in which you can actually do insurance business. Now, the same thing also is true and relevant for the lending side, right? Today, let's say I give money to a small factory for purchasing of a machine. Now, I know that the machine is going to last for about 6 or 7 years, right? Now, there is obviously at some stage there is going to be a replacement demand coming across because of either modernization or the old machine has become obsolete. Second factor is that if I keep track of him, I will know that, okay, this fellow is growing his business at about 30% a year, and at some time his demand is so high that he will feel the need to buy another machine. And I also know that his existing factory is not going to be enough to accommodate 2-3 more machines. So he will probably look for a new premises to move out and buy. So all these are, if I look at it, I've already talked to you about giving more machinery loans. one for new machines, that is to expand capacity, and the other one was upgradation of an obsolete machine, and third one is for purchase of a commercial property or industrial property where he can put up a larger factory, correct? And therefore, concomitant to that, the working capital demand also keeps growing of that person. So if I'm able to track an individual the way I mentioned earlier in case of insurance, I should be able to also track the same in the same manner, even an organization, how the business goes up and down. So all this data is available to me. So if I'm able to do all of this and track the person's needs, even before if I say that he's utilizing his machine capacity to, let's say, 95%. I know the machine can produce, let's say, 1,000 units. He is running at around 950, 970. At some stage, he will already start thinking in terms of buying a new machine. So if I approach him then, rather than waiting for him to come back or reach me through a DSA, whatever it is, I have a much better chance of doing a sale. Right? So this is the way, by being proactive, by tracking properly, and by promising what you deliver, you should be in a position to get more customers, in spite of the fact that maybe you could actually extract a much better price from him for all this wonderful relationship management, because there is always a certain human element that comes across. People are not that cold, at least not in this country. So if you set up a relationship with your banker or your NBFC, even if that person were to charge you a little higher, you would actually evaluate that higher price vis-a-vis the kind of services that has been rendered to you, and you might actually opt for a more premium pricing. So you don't have to compete on price if you do all these things.
No, I think this is a good point. I wanted to just reiterate that and see if, so one thing which you said is better understanding of the customer. As a sort of a follow-on question there. So let's say you talk about manufacturing as an area where your firm is focused on. Does it mean the whole the ability of a lender in understanding and predicting the customer's business cycle and the market as a whole, that gets better over time? Like, I'm sure every business is in a learning phase, and so you have a better ability to underwrite the risk in that business. You have the better ability to predict the growth of that segment, right? And hence your ability to, because you understand that segment better than, let's say, another larger bank or some other lender, because they may be focused on other areas. So are you saying that for a new age lender, it is important that they understand the segment they are working in much more than the other guys out there to compete and win that business? Is that a good sort of summary beyond from the core of it, what you just described?
Absolutely. And see, let's also understand that each industry, each business, each geography goes through its own changes, right? Has its own qualities, right? So what works for a steel industry doesn't necessarily work for the garment industry, right? The entire the socio-political, etc., all those considerations really come into the picture. Economic factors, so many other things are there. Technology obsolescence, for instance, right? Now, unless and until the lender understands the sector to which he is lending, it will be very difficult for you to do a good job of anticipating the needs, and very importantly, you can't do a good job of anticipating the impending risks as well, right? Now, I'll give you a simple example. Now, obviously, by 2030, as per the commitments made by the government of India to the Paris Climate Summit, about 50% of Indian automobiles which are sold in 2030 have to be electric, right? Now, what does that mean for the automobile sector and the auto component sector? One needs to understand very clearly, because obviously at some stage, when the car technology was there and then later on got replaced by better technology, all the carburetor manufacturers went out of business, right? Similar thing can happen in case today if the IC engine is replaced with an electrical engine. A huge change is going to happen in the entire auto sector, right? That may happen today, may happen 5 years down the line, but the more you are able to understand this, you will be in a position to launch new products or new offerings which are maybe more relevant to the auto sector of tomorrow rather than auto sector of yesterday, correct? So to have a very good understanding, if possible, you should be an expert in that segment, or at least you should have a very good working knowledge of the segment if you really have to do a good job of lending and obviously recovering the money as well, since you spoke about NPA to start with. The second point is that every single geographical sector, okay, is different. Say, for instance, you could have a plastic manufacturer in Bombay, and you could have a plastic manufacturer in Calcutta, right? There is plastic industry in both the places, but the kind of plastics that are manufactured in one place is different from the kind of plastics that are manufactured somewhere else, right? You could have a entire geography which is depending upon making the Syntex kind of tanks or buckets, and those are also plastic, right? Or the other one could be dealing in auto components, right, which is also plastic, right? Or pharma packaging material, which is also plastic. So unless and until you understand the true nature of the so-called plastic, it will become very difficult for you to lend in a meaningful way to the plastic industry per se, right? If buckets demand goes down, that has got nothing to do with auto components. It's got nothing to do with pharma packaging material, right? So one has to get into a lot more granularity and devise the lending policies accordingly. Also, the other part is, and this is very important for the consumer segment, not necessarily for the MSME segment. Each customer is different, right? His cultural factors are different. His family setup is different. So if I am able to create something which is unique to you, you will probably buy it at a higher price than if I offer you a standard package, which is applicable to you and to everybody else, but only satisfy 80% of your needs. Correct? For that additional 20% where you have a perfect fit, you don't mind paying a little extra. And this is how premium works, right? So same haircut you can have for 50 rupees, or you can pay 2,000 rupees also.
Yes.
Why do you pay 2,000 rupees?
You can have it at home free.
Exactly, you could have it at home free as well, right? So it's a how do you customize in such a manner that as far as practicable, your universe, which is where you are addressing this customized product, can actually theoretically even go down to one, that it is uniquely created for only you.
Yes, yes.
It's possible, right? At least theoretically. So as and when we keep on shrinking this universe, the more specialized you are, better is your ability to charge a price.
So one more thing, I mean, since the way you describe, so it looks like this is more of a question in future, and I'm just thinking aloud here. So let's say you understand the segment very well, right? That's the core objective. Either it's a consumer segment or the MSME, and great example on the plastic business, plastic industry side. Would it make sense for a lender to? So is there or let's say is there a place for a value-added services play beyond lending money? Like, can you go and say, let's say you say, look, I'm expert, I have got these 3 consultants with me, and either they are on your staff or you have borrowed them from BCG, Bain, or Ernst & Young, saying, look, these are my 4 consultants, they will come and help you on how the plastic industry is going to shape up in next 3 years, and I'm going to tell you how you can grow your business, right? And I will do all of this because you are my customer. And I'm going to make sure that I fund you, and basically I'm funding for your growth or some. So does it even sound logical for a lending industry to have, or it is just because I'm not from this industry, so I'm not able to fully. But it just comes naturally to me, saying because you are investing in customers' growth, so you should be willing to spend some money, right? So I mean, is there a place for that?
Absolutely. I think it's a great point that you made. Being a lender does not only doesn't only mean that you give money and then forget about the customer, right, until he bounces his check. Being a lender also, and in the manner in which I am talking about tracking a customer, right, tracking an industry or tracking an individual, what are you trying to do? You are essentially trying to build a lifelong relationship with that person, right? Now, when you are talking about a relationship, it is not only being a fair weather friend, right? If things are good, you give money to him and say, "Wawa, shabash," and then go away, right? But if the real help that you can render as a so-called partner in progress, okay, is to hold that person's hand when the chips are down, correct? So therefore, this sort of consulting that you spoke about, yeah, it's a very more formal way of getting things done. Yes, there could be a price to be paid by the customer for it, but then there is a value-added service which is available to the customer. If you really look at it, it's not a far-fetched thought at all. Today, when a rehabilitation professional, right, an insolvency professional or somebody who's trying to rehabilitate a business, what is it that the person is trying to do? He says that, okay, boss, you have a problem here. Your financials are in a mess. Your business is not doing too well. Let me step in and then try to do some kind of a financial restructuring and try to see that how you can actually improve your business performance and therefore your ability to stay on ground, right? So this essentially means that it's not just a financial re-engineering that is being done. There is a certain amount of room for operational re-engineering as well, correct? So this sort of a platform that you spoke about of having a bunch of guys who are experts in certain industries giving a certain consulting is a thing which will happen sooner rather than later. I don't think it's far-fetched at all, and that exactly cements the entire relationship that I'm speaking about, right? Obviously, as they say, you have to confide in your lawyer and your doctor, but you should also confide as much in your banker if you want any help. Chips are down.
Got it. No, this. I thought it makes sense to, at least from an outsider standpoint, that you can think of something like that. So now, in the process of you brought another point about service and the promise to the customer, which is again going to be another way to differentiate the one lender from the another lender, right? In the eyes of the customer. So what are the promises, or maybe an example or two, maybe what are the promises people don't keep, like which you would have seen, observed, either in your own business, not easy to do, and or other businesses you have seen where customers would have complained. So what are those 2-3 some promises which people are failed to deliver, and how should one go about solving for that? Like what would be a method to address those promises, how to sort of address that? Like where is the ball getting dropped?
Okay, see, ball can get dropped at every stage where there is a handover, right, between one hand to the other, right? So the failure in service standard or failure in keeping up to a promise can happen right from the day go, right? The moment customer calls your call center and says, hey, I want a loan, and the call center person promises that, okay, somebody will reach out, somebody will call you in 30 minutes, and the call doesn't happen for 2 days, the promise obviously is broken, right? Obviously, this guy is saying, boss, these areas are not interested in selling a loan to me. Similarly, when the salesperson goes to promises that, I'll come and meet you, sir, tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and goes there at 12 o'clock, again, promise broken. So these are the things which actually create a certain negative impression, or for that matter, if you are sharp, a positive impression of the customer in the customer's mind. And so on and so forth. So I'm obviously taking a very simplistic example. Obviously, the other promises that sometimes tend to get made without an intention to keep them is on pricing, for instance, right? Or somebody might promise that, yeah, your loan is done, and then whereas the case is probably not even been logged in yet. So these are some of the things that tend to happen in the marketplace, and only through continuous education of your team and making them aware of the need to keep up the service levels can you actually overcome that to a fair extent. But you still will have points of failure. I don't think anybody can say that there will be 0 point of failure. You can only try and reduce it as far as practical. But I think the bigger issue is, and how can you actually do that? One is the education part, which I'm talking about. The other, are you as an organization promoting a culture of being organized, right? Now, you could have a situation where a salesperson just uses his mind or his brain as his diary, right? The other guy could be probably writing it down on a piece of paper and then forgetting about it. But if you are forcing the guy to actually record his conversation and record the next timelines in a system, and the system were to alert this person, let's say half an hour before or 1 day before or 15 minutes before, saying that, hey, boss, go and call Mr. Nilesh tomorrow morning at 11:30, right? And reminds him once again at 11:15 that you please in the next 15 minutes call up Mr. Nilesh. Now, that will ensure that the failure points are reduced to a fair extent. Otherwise, to myself, I will not even write it down. I'll say, yeah, Nilesh, I remember I'll call him at 11:30. Now, I may not remember whether it is 11:30 or whether it is Thursday or Friday or whatever it is, right? So therefore, the the failure points are can be actually brought down significantly through technology if you force the organization to be more disciplined in terms of the processes. So those are the two simple things that you can do: education on what should be promised and what should not be promised, and more importantly, defining the kind of timelines that you as an organization promise. So there is a certain amount of service standards that you need to set for yourselves, saying that, okay, 90% of my cases or 95% of my cases will get sanctioned in, let's say, 5 days or 3 days, whatever you decide, and making sure that that gets communicated. And if there is a problem, the sooner you go to the customer back and say that, look, there is a problem, I will take 24 hours more, it is easier rather than not calling the guy up at all and calling him 1 day later and say, sorry sir, ye ho gaya, you know, all those kind of things.
Got it. So you are saying education, meaning training the teams to make sure that they are aware of the service standards and how they should behave and what they should say is one part of the problem resolution bucket, and the other is the whole aspect of technology and how technology can guide people in avoiding the pitfalls, trying to make sure they call the customers on time whenever they have to, and so on and so forth. So that's actually very interesting. So I have another sort of a related question on sort of getting one step back on the service piece of it, which we talked about, right? So one way to sort of build, we talked about the value-added services, but another way to probably look at is how do you leverage your existing customers with new opportunities? Is opportunity only restricted to the products we sell as a lender, or is there an opportunity to present other offerings which could be a partner offerings, and how big thing will that be going forward? Like maybe there is I believe insurance is one offering people do package and position, but are there other ideas of similar kind, and how's that going to be moving? Like, what's your sort of outlook of that? Will it be more like a fee, I won't say fee based income, but some sort of upsell of other products? So is that love to hear how you see that unfolding.
See, as you rightly mentioned, insurance is definitely one thing that a lot of the organizations bundle and sell. Of course, the primary purpose is to protect the loan, but it can actually go beyond that as well. So that's one value-added service that you could look at, but that's been in operation for quite a few years now. But now, with about 2 years ago, RBI announced this whole scheme called co-lending, right? Now, what does co-lending actually mean? Co-lending simply means that you partner. Let's say I'm an NBFC, I partner with a bank. Okay. As per the guidelines, there are a lot of products that I cannot offer to my customer. So I know Mr. Nilesh very well. I know the kind of factory that he runs, and I know the sort of good business that he does. But I can only offer as an NBFC a term loan to you, right? I cannot give you an overdraft facility or a LC or a bank guarantee kind of facility to you, right? Nor can I allow you to manage your surplus treasury money by parking it into a fixed deposit or whatever. So if I have a tie-up with a bank, I am doing the front ending. The bank doesn't come into the picture. I do all the hard work of customer assessment and all of that. Take it to the bank. The bank will give you an overdraft, right? So it kind of becomes a kind of a sort of a co-lending or a front-ending sort of a service that is available today, and there are guidelines to promote and permit that as well. So this is another ecosystem that tends to that will become larger and larger as we go along. And the second point is that as per our own, let's say my own risk appetite, I could have a certain limit beyond which I cannot lend to you. Maybe I've set my limit at, let's say, 5 crores to you, but your requirements could be 50 crores. Where will you go for the balance 45? Instead of you going to a bank, I could bring a bank which is known to me and with whom I have an understanding in terms of the service levels. I could do the entire front ending for the full 50 crores. I will give 5, bank will give 45. That sort of an arrangement works extremely well from a customer's perspective. And if you have a relationship with that, obviously you have a very ready supply of products, but more importantly, the customer has a much greater attachment to you. Very little chances that he will leave you and go.
Got it. No, I think this is interesting. This is a very interesting point. I did not think of that. and I was honestly not fully aware of this ability, which is now being available to the to the lending partners. So if you so from a growth standpoint, if we look at so the as I see the ecosystem, like a lot of fintech players are coming in, like the people who already have customers, like maybe it's more of a consumer lending kind of a aspect, because anybody who has a customer now, either let's say an Airtel, or let's say a PhonePe or a Paytm, or any of these guys, like all of them have consumers. Now everybody have to just go and sell a newer product, right? So these type of companies are expanding the market, like in some sense the market expansion is happening, right? So from where from your perspective and how you see the future, the whole lending as an industry, like how fast the growth rates you see would be, and because you see the players are already more players are coming down, you said, as from a competition has increased. So does it so more players will exist because the market expansion will take care of everybody gets a piece of the action, or you see that it will consolidate, like people will go down, and or two lenders will merge and stuff. Like, how do you see that sort of panning out over next few years, or next decade for that matter?
So I'll give you two types of answers. Okay, one from a very macro perspective, where I'm looking at the industry as a whole, ignoring the individual players. Now, overall, if you look at it, the penetration of let's say consumer lending, to take an example, is very, very low in India, right? So I think even after 70 years of independence, we have only scratched the surface in terms of the financial inclusion per se, right? Financial inclusion doesn't only mean having a bank account to put your savings money into it. It also means that you get access to loans and you get access to various other financial services as well, including saving products and all of that. So that is something which is a huge gap in terms of the demand and supply. So there is a fantastic amount of room for more and more players to come in, because even today, if you look at it, 90% of the market for lending products, especially the consumer lending products, is restricted to the top 10-12 cities. Beyond that, the market simply drops off, right? So you will find very little penetration of financing in a smaller town like, let's say, Murshidabad, for instance, or anything beyond your capital cities in most of the places. So there is a huge amount of room for that. The microfinance institutions have started a small in a way to proliferate this entire lending to smaller markets as well. But there is a lot that can be still done. So at a macro level, there is enough and more room for more and more players to come in, much stronger players to come. So even the existing guys will grow, new guys will also come, and each one will have to try and find his own niche, right? So that's at a macro level. But at a micro level, definitely there will be, as if 100 people come in, there will be about 20, 30, 40 will be surviving. The others will get merged or simply die away, leaving a certain amount of mark on the market. So at a micro level, there could be consolidations and mergers and deaths of organizations, as it were. But at a macro level, the pie itself is so large. I don't think we need to worry about demand being a constraint in our country, especially if you're going to talk about the next growth has to come from India as a country. For the GDP to grow at let's say 1% real GDP growth will effectively means growth in lending or growth in advances of around 3 to 4 times. Correct?
Okay.
So a 10% real GDP growth could actually mean a 30% to 40% growth in the lending market itself. So that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, so basically, so more and more players will come in, and each of them, not each of them, but many of them will have the opportunity to scale and build a large, build a sustainable business, if not large, at the same time. Do you, as you've seen the ecosystem getting evolved in terms of sourcing of a loan, right? How's that change and is changing? Meaning, and obviously one is the new customer, existing customer upsell is one bucket, but the new sourcing and the attribution of it, like where it is coming from, where it was coming from, let's say 3-4 years ago versus where it is coming from now, because what I've heard and learned is that a lot of when distribution changes, businesses transform, right? So is there a meaningful change in distribution of and sourcing of customers which has happened, and where is that direction? Like, how is that moving? Is it going to be different for different businesses? Of course, A or B, there are some changes which are going to, which are permanent in nature, for example.
Yeah, I think there is, I would say, 3 or 4 trends that are happening. You're absolutely right. The distribution itself has undergone a significant change over the past 10 odd years. Earlier, you had only 2 options. Either you had a brick and mortar DSA, which was there, whom you could have go and ask for help in getting a loan, or you could simply walk into the bank branch or the NBFC branch and ask for a loan. Today, the DSA himself or itself is actually becoming more and more digital rather than being a brick and mortar kind of a thing. Yes, there are digital guys and there are brick and mortar guys also, but over time the digital guys are becoming larger and larger, and they will ultimately replace substantial part of the brick and mortar DSAs. So you have an intermediary ecosystem which is primarily built upon the digital space, which is emerging very fast and very well. And you are obviously aware of some of the larger players who have gone into this side and been fairly successful in their endeavors. So this is one trend that has happened. On the other trend is there is a, so obviously it doesn't mean that you outsource your distribution to these digital aggregators and then you sit tight. No, most of the companies are also improving or increasing their penetration of direct business as well. So direct business can be again a brick and mortar kind of a thing, but then obviously there is a certain amount of limitation in terms of the reach out and all of that. So if you want to really service a pan-India market, or you want to reach out to those guys who are more physically distant than you are, the only option is for you to develop your own digital procurement kind of an ecosystem. So both these are coming up very fast. I think what it does is that it is creating it is actually bridging the gap between the physical gap between the customer and the lender, on one side. The other one is that the turnaround times in terms of actually understanding the customer, getting his documentation done, etc., is coming much closer and closer. The third factor is that transparency levels are going up, because you are today directly able to carry on a conversation in an electronic manner, or even through a video call kind of a thing. You are able to talk to the lender directly. So therefore, there can be a much lesser chance, would be a much lesser chance of any kind of wrong promises being made and not being kept, etc. So the transparency is increasing, the distance is shrinking, and the turnaround times are shrinking, right? This is very important. The other one is where I said much earlier when we started to converse, that can you create more and more customized offering which is specifically meant for you as an individual, right? So that sort of an ecosystem is the next level of evolution, I would say, that I don't have to go with the standardized offering which the bank is giving me, but I should be in a position to demand a very customized kind of a, make your own pizza kind of, make your own loan sort of an offering, right? So I say that, okay, I like this, I don't like this. So I should be in a position to aggregate the various features of a loan and create a product. That would be the next level of evolution, which I'm quite sure will come pretty fast. And if through the digitalization that the government has done, if by simply giving my Aadhaar number to a bank, the bank is able to understand who am I, what is my family, where do I live, what has been my residential stability, that means have I moved houses too many times, etc., etc., and what is my bank account status, and what is it that I'm really trying to do in my life, they should be in a position to give me a offering in a matter of few minutes, which is more meaningful to me than a standard templated offering that today the banks are offering to me or NBFCs are offering to me. So it can work both ways, that I can demand and I could be served as well, depending upon my tastes and preferences, because many times customer doesn't know what he wants. But if the organization is able to understand, the lender is able to understand that given the various characteristics of this customer, this is probably a good fit, and then goes with a more customized offering, it will be a wow.
So one thing I'd like to I share one little story. So I have a friend who runs is like a DSA in the market, and I asked him about the turnaround time from various lenders, and he was saying it's pathetic. Like there is a huge variation in that. So and then there are some lenders, and I've personally availed some service where you can go and say I want a loan, and you get a loan in like a minute or two or whatever, right? It just comes into your bank account. And there are some who are disrupting the business in the fashion of giving a timeline. So when do you see the lenders who are going to become larger? I'm not saying who will grow faster than the industry average, let's say, right? Would be the ones who will be able to roll out these promises and meet them. Like, is that the breed of the lenders who would actually do a better job or grow faster than the industry average? Is that going to be a characteristic of a kind? Let's say you say, well, you give me your all the documents I need, and I promise you in 3 days or 24 hours, I'll let you know, or I'll let you know in 6 hours whether I'm going to give you the loan or not, right? And then in next 18 hours, it will go into your bank. So is there like the promise of time and decision? Is that going to be like people will go and fight for that, or because I hear only few players really literally talk about it today?
See, turnaround times is obviously one very important factor in determining what sort of service levels that you are able to offer. And that works very well for a consumer industry. Say today, for instance, you want to buy a TV and you go into a showroom. In all likelihood, there will be somebody who will be sitting there who will be willing to offer you a loan for the TV as well, right? And that gets done in a matter of a few minutes, right? You don't have to really wait for lengthy processing to happen on that, right? So people have developed those sort of things for the very small ticket consumer lending, or for that matter for unsecured loans of, let's say, 15, 20, 30,000 rupees, or payday loans, where turnaround times is much more important. But turnaround time when it comes to financing a business are not that relevant, right? Because normally a business guy, when he thinks of buying a machine, is probably doing a month, 2 months, 3 months kind of planning, right? Because there is a certain amount of cycle time that is involved in taking the decision and all of that. So their time per se is not important, but what is important is that are you as a lender able to understand him better? Are you able to give him a product, a loan offering which is flexible enough for to suit his cash flows? And are you able to determine whether the additional money that he's going to make out of doing this investment, will it be justifiable or not? So those are different kind of service levels. It's more to do with understanding, not so much with time. It's a depth related issue, whereas in case of a consumer, it's more a time related issue. So, but bottom line is service levels have to improve, whichever way you define it for the relevant segment. And their technology can play a huge role. And to a certain extent, you also have to keep on reinventing your own business models and your credit models and all that, so that you are keeping pace with time and not just stuck in a groove for too long.
So this is interesting. And since you're talking about service levels, let me ask a question on, like, do you see technology budgets increasing as a percentage of, loan book by the lenders? And yes, if why yes, and if no, then where is the no coming from? Like how would you sort of weigh this?
Okay, I'll put it this way. Let me give you an example of Profectus Capital itself. When we started, a consultant who looked at our business plan had said that you will require about 30 crores worth of investment in IT equipment and IT systems in order to start off the business. We said to hell with it, and we actually did the implementation in about 4 crores, right? Almost 90% money we saved. So gone are those days when you bought a huge server and you had a server room and a fail-safe backup mode and this and that and so many other things. All those kind of innovations. Today everything is on the cloud, right? Today everything is available for a service, right? You have a SaaS providers which are coming across. You have a huge ecosystem of fintech, to take a specific example for our industry, that's developing. So all these are, you can demand and take the services on a per piece basis, right? So you don't have to actually go and reinvent the wheel, right? Your wheel is also going to be around if it has to run. So why do you reinvent the wheel? Just take it off from somebody who's offering it as a service. So I don't think the technology costs are going to go up in proportion to the business volumes or the complexity of the business. On the contrary, they are, and historical evidence will point out that it's actually come down drastically than maybe what it was 10 years ago.
Interesting. So, but the whole automation, which reduces, let's say, some sort of a people involvement, would make you invest more in technology. But what I hear you say is the traditional way we were used to invest in servers and all that, because that has gone down, all that has sort of vanished altogether. I can buy the service whenever I need. So there you're saving money. But if, let's say, you invest more in automation, where you can do more stuff with less people, it's easily offsetted by the other savings which has been made in the technology. Well, that's interesting one. So all the lenders who are listening to the story, they should buy a LeadSquared then, as a no. So good. This is very interesting. So we have 4 minutes left. We can maybe take some questions. Shibani, if you're there, we can maybe have. Sachin, I actually totally lost track of time hearing you, and the information you have shared is fabulous, and good learning for me also today. So Shibani, over to you with questions, whatever you see in the panel.
The lenders have a lot of questions, so I will start with Deepak's question. He says, digital lending is no doubt the future, but the regulations like non-face-to-face customers can be given maximum loan for rupees 60,000 basis online KYC are a big hassle. What is your view on it?
See, these are all things which will change over time, right? You did not have a ecosystem which was there 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So today you are seeing a lot of these things, and any regulator will be very cautious in allowing any change in the regulation, simply because they have to be worried about the negative implications of any such change as well, because not everybody is honest in any business. So there could be frauds, and there could be issues relating to misleading and all of these things coming across. So the regulator will open up, but I can tell you India is blessed with very proactive regulators who always have supported technology and thought 2 steps ahead of us. So if that is going to remain valid, I don't think these kind of issues will hurt you over a period of time. Allow some more time, I'm sure things will change.
Okay. Deepak has another question. He says, in banks, e-KYC, video KYC can be done by bank employees only, resulting into additional cost and manual activities, wherein benefits of technology cannot be reaped because you add an employee to every digital transaction. DSAs can source business but cannot do e-KYC until they are BC, making DSAs a BC across length and breadth of country is again a big task. Can you suggest some solutions to get over these issues?
See, ultimately KYC is the responsibility of the bank, and bank cannot outsource it to anybody else, right? So therefore, bring out the power of doing KYC to a third party, unless that person is a signed up BC with various safeguards, I don't foresee that happening at all. So therefore, we have to understand the difference between sourcing a case and actually getting it onboarded onto the system. KYC is very important from a country's security perspective, right? It's not just a question of taking a photograph. It actually goes all the way into terrorist financing and those kind of issues, right? So KYC is not something to be taken very lightly at all. Any amount of additional investment that you make in ensuring that the KYC is done properly will be worth it. And we just spoke about how technology can save the number of people being employed. The number of people who are actually being saved can be used for these kind of KYC related stuff, which are very important, fundamental to the survival of the country and the banking system. So I think that should not be given a buy at all.
All right, Deepak, I think we're done with your questions. If you have any follow-up ones, though, please ask. I am moving to Mohammed Aftabdin's question. He says, how will we gain belief of customers through digital platform to sell the insurance policies to an unknown person?
See, obviously in the insurance sale itself, there are a lot of safeguards that you have, right? The individual insurance companies do have their own processes to make sure that, the so-called unknown person is really known, at least to an extent, to cover the risks. So these are all things which are evolving over a period of time. See, for instance, KYC was not a factor at all for insurance earlier. Now today KYC has become mandatory for life insurance, and obviously going forward it will become so even for general insurance and all of that. So therefore you do have a way to establish the identity of a customer. What really happens is that through the digital platforms, you get a lot of information as a customer. If I turn the question around to a different direction, how do you as a customer trust an insurance company, right? There are enough and more platforms which are available, which will talk to you about which insurers products are better, which insurers products are cheaper, and which are more suitable to you, etc. So those sort of advisory services are also developing very quickly and very well. So as a customer also, you're able to figure out, okay, this is my right insurer and that's not my right insurer, and take calls accordingly. See, the digital ecosystem itself is a kind of a self-learning kind of a thing. So what was not possible yesterday is being possible today. What is not possible today will become possible tomorrow. So these are all evolving very fast and very quickly. I don't think that identity or credibility factor is going to be an issue going forward.
All right. Okay, so next question from Vivek. He says, lending has broadly three parts: origination, getting a customer transaction; two is decision making, structuring the transaction and approval; three, servicing, post sanction servicing and monitoring. Where do you see digitization impacting in each of these parts, especially in wholesale banking? Especially, do you see decision making being automated for large corporates?
For large corporate, decision making will be only aided by technology. I don't think the way it is happening in a or electronic shop in respect of a TV or a mobile phone loan, that sort of an automation should not come, cannot come in side or a large ticket side, because the risks and the requirement of turnaround time, as I mentioned earlier, are totally different. Depth of understanding the customer is much more, so which you can only do partially through data analysis and technology. But there is always going to be the art of lending which has to come in, which I mentioned in the beginning. So that is something that cannot be done away with. So you will have progressively greater degrees of automation, but will it completely replace decision making at a corporate banking level? I don't see that happening in my life. Maybe afterwards, I don't know.
Yeah, that is a tough one.
Okay, we still have like about 5 to 6 questions more.
How much time do we have so we can restrict the number of questions based on your availability?
Yeah.
We're already out of time, so we can take a few more questions, KV sir?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe a couple of more.
We'll maybe take 2 more questions and then we can conclude.
All right, sure. Devendra, I think he knows you, sir. He's saying very great to hear from you. So he's saying, how are rural customers getting the benefit of digital lending?
It will take some more time, but today, if you look at it, there are 80 crore smartphone users, right? And substantial part of them, number of them are in the rural areas. So, it's only growing very fast. So all those buttonwala phones will go away before you realize it, and the next generation entire refresh will only be happening through smartphones. So technically speaking, the ability for you to reach out to rural customers through digital lending is not difficult. Even today, if you look at it, a lot of digital transactions are happening in the rural areas. If they can't do it themselves, they go to an assisted kind of a mode where the Kirana Wala, who's now a BC, is actually doing certain transactions for them, right? And there are certain village level entrepreneurs who have set up these digital kiosks, as it were, under the government schemes, etc., where they can actually enroll you on an Aadhaar and they can provide various government facilities to you. you can check your bank account, and they can transfer money from somewhere else to your account, and so on and so forth. So you give them cash, they will probably remit it to your son somewhere else, right? Those sort of facilities are happening in an assisted mode as well. So if not fully digital, at least a digital plus an assisted kind of a model can work extremely well in rural areas, even though the customer may be illiterate or partly literate. So those systems are developing. In fact, they've been tried and tested, and I've seen this kind of a ecosystem working very well in extremely rural, small villages as well. In a very remote village in Arunachal, I'll tell you, last month, 2 months ago when I went there is a State Bank branch, right? You just have to go. You don't need to have any kind of internet banking arrangement or whatever, right? And you can bank with any bank. You can withdraw a credit card, money based upon your credit card. There is no ATM there. So you go to the State Bank branch, and they have a certain mobile phone with a program which is loaded onto it. They actually take your credit card and do the necessary details entering, and they give you cash. So it's a manual ATM, if you wish, right? MTM, manual teller machine.
Yeah, it's manual teller machine. That's a good word.
Okay.
Interesting.
Another question, I think maybe the last one then, Sanjay's question. He says, collection is key for long-term survival for lending businesses, especially in MSME business.
MSME.
Yeah, how can we improve the collection efficiency and the impending risk through digital platform?
What is the most important factor in collection? There are two. One is anticipation, and once an event has happened, alacrity or speed. Correct? Now both can be easily aided through digital means, right? If you are able to have a model whereby the delinquency behavior of a customer can be predicted, you can reach there before anybody else, right? That is number one. And number two, the technology can also guide you to reach there on time and not waste your time, right? So it's as simple as that. If you know that I'm going to default, you will reach my home one day before my actual default happens, right? And you will remind me, say, sir, tomorrow morning I'm going to come and collect money from you, right? Very easy. I will also be not able to run away because I would not have anticipated a visit today, because my EMI is falling due to bounce tomorrow. So day after tomorrow I may be gone, right? So if you come to me today, you should be in a position to catch me as well. That's number one. Number two is that you are able to plan your collection. Is a very field oriented affair, right? A lot of calls, follow up, actual physical visits. So how do you schedule yourselves? Do you go from, let's say, south of Bombay to north of Bombay, come back to central, again back to south Bombay? Or do you do your beat planning in a manner that you are spending your time in a more efficient manner? So will the system be in a position to prompt you that, hey, your next contact is going to be in the next 5 minutes walk away, right? You don't have to go all the way to Borivali and come back, right? So if you're able to, through technology, plan your activities well, naturally you become more efficient, and therefore instead of contacting 5 customers in a day, you could probably do 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So that naturally becomes important, and you know whom you are going to talk to, what is the actual circumstances of default, and if the default is yet to happen, when is it likely to happen? So you can actually predict behavior of a customer much before anyone else, and the sooner you reach, the better it is. Early bird catches the worm.
Awesome. Well, I think this was a very good conversation, sir. Really appreciate you taking out your valuable time in talking to the audience here with us. And I personally have learned a few new things today. Would love to have talk to you later on some of those as well. But thank you so much for joining in the conversation today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Shubhani, for hosting it.
Thank you so much, KV sir, and thank you so much, Nilesh, for doing the hard work in this session, doing the actual hosting. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Okay. All right, before everyone disappears, just a quick note on our upcoming webinars. So anyone who wants to listen in from Angel Broking, please do join us next week. So that webinar is next week. And then we are also in conversation with Aviva India the following week. So if you want to join those webinars, I have shared the calendar with you. Please do join us then. All right, take care. Thank you so much, Nilesh.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.